Greetings, my magnificent ones. Sue Paulson here, your magnificence mentor, and we're back with another episode of Heaven on Earth. Today is October the 20th, 2023. I don't usually give the date, but in light of recent world activities, if you happen to be listening to this much later than this, then you'll know a little more of what I'm referring to. So the snippets on the news today were all about this latest conflict that's going on in the Middle East. And my heart kind of sank because this conflict has been going on for centuries. And it doesn't seem to be any closer to a resolution today than it was all those years ago. Well, of course, the stakes are high. And there are already many casualties. And so this is causing real concern around the world. So I wanted to weigh in a little bit about this because it's a helpless feeling when, especially if you feel quite attached to a particular cause or a particular group of people. Maybe you have relatives that are at risk, and that's a real concern. And here we are. I'm way on the other side of the globe in Canada, and not a lot that I can do about what's going on. I don't know much about the conflict except what I hear on the news or maybe read in a newspaper. I don't have any solutions, that's for sure. I just wish everybody would just flat out get along. I mean, that's the bottom line for me. And it tugs at my heart because it doesn't feel like heaven on earth to me. In fact, these people are living hell on earth. And wow, why? What is that all about anyway? So I want, and of course it's so interesting to me that as happens when there's sides taken, then people feel compelled to take a side. Well, they're wrong, they're right. I'm for this, I'm against that. Whatever issue is at hand. The challenge with doing that is that when we take sides, then we can become embroiled in the problem that already exists. And then all it does is add extra weight and pull the situation down even further. And of course, the primary emotion that gets triggered when you have this level of violence going on, and of course it's not just in the Middle East, but we've had problems in Ukraine for some time now. Well, it just makes it seem even worse, and so there seems to be no end to what's going on. And of course the primary fear in all of, well, the primary emotion in all of this is fear. So it's all too easy to look at this situation and then get fearful ourselves, for not only for people that are involved in the situation, but fearful of, what if this triggers a world war? What if, and then we spiral down into this pit of despair because of having these emotions that start to really overwhelm us. So I'm doing my best not to do that, because I recognize that you can't solve a problem when you're mired in the problem, and I don't want to be part of this problem. I want to be part of the solution, whatever it is. So here's what I've decided to do my part with this from I guess what would I call it, a stronger focus is what I'm going to do is just beam light to the whole situation. Because when light outshines the dark, when light reveals the dark, that's when we see more clearly. and we're light beings. I firmly convinced of that even though we're having a human experience, we are light beings. So beaming light for something, to something, can make a difference, even if we, especially collectively, even if we're not sure if it does or not, we can't prove it. That's what I'm doing, is when I hear of escalation, or I hear yet more reports of casualties and so on, I beam the light of compassion, of empathy, of understanding in with every fiber of my being, because that to me, I don't know if it's going to do any good, but it soothes me and it feels as if at least I can do something. And obviously, I mean, there are some physical things we can do to with through our wallets and volunteer activities and so on, that can make life a little easier for those who are caught up in this conflict. But more than anything, then I think that what's required in this scenario is a lot of light. There are, as you've probably heard often, there are two sides to every story. Nobody can be all right and nobody can be all wrong. So I can't pick a side. I feel for everybody, and I sort of understand a little bit about what they're going through, but I've never lived that. So how can I even draw any kind of a line in the sand? So I'm not going to. I'm just going to, I confess that I'm a little bit irritated about it, because I think, come on, everybody, let's just get along here. This is like giving weapons to kindergarten kids that haven't figured out how to behave. And I know it feels more serious than that. Um, but but if we track it back, let's start at the very beginning with what goes on inside of us and what goes on in relation to other people in our lives. So I know I grew up with my parents instilling a conscience in me, and let your conscience be your guide. And there were lots of times, if I was stepping out of line, my conscience would kick in and say, "Oh, Sue, no, 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 no." And then I'd feel guilty, or I'd feel ashamed, or whatever. So I'd have this little battle going on inside myself. It was a conflict. And of course, there was no winning in that conflict, because I could never seem to make it right unless I made amends, unless I acknowledged my error, faced up to my mistake, and said, okay, I got to start again. But of course, that I didn't necessarily let myself off the hook. I kept beating myself up for, you should know better than that, and blah blah blah. And, and while that may be true, there wasn't even a teaspoon of compassion in me in those early days, until I realized that I needed to be my own best friend. I needed to be exactly on my side. And so I began to lighten up in regard to how I saw myself. I really worked on finding what I believe to be worthy about me, and building on that, and acknowledging the good that I am, the good that I've done, so that I could begin to trust that if I did make a mistake in some way, shape, or form, then I could take responsibility for it, but I didn't have to blame myself. I didn't have to persecute myself for that. So we're very familiar with persecution, because we've done that to ourselves many times. Well, maybe you haven't, but I know I have. And I know how that plays out, and it's not fun, and it's painful. Well, of course, if I get very good at learning how to persecute myself, maybe because somebody else has persecuted me, then I too can become a persecutor like that fast. Somebody offends me, somebody steps out of line according to my values or the way I live my life. And I can easily fall into that pit of darkness and retaliate in some way. I could be filled with resentment and maybe even look for ways of revenge. Well, you think, oh well, that's just happening in my own backyard, or I had a if I had a fight with a neighbor, or if I was at odds with the garbage man, or whatever. Well, that's just a little thing, right? Well, yeah, but that's how wars get started. I was watching a podcast today, and somebody was talking about how fighting amongst families can get really, really nasty. And I've witnessed that. I've experienced that. I mean, supposedly you're loving siblings, and one sets the other off, and it's feels like World War III going on. Well, that's the nature of humans in us either wanting to be right or wanting to win out over or whatever. Many years ago, when I was working with corporate training, the concept of win-win rose up, and it felt like kind of a new concept. And the idea was, well, if there's a winner and a loser, both lose. But if you can find a way in negotiations so that both parties win, then it's win-win, then everybody wins. So this was a big deal in the early days in company circles to find the win-win. And it still applies today, that there's a but it's a win-win-win. Everybody needs to win on all sides in order to have a situation just resolved, like it never rears its nasty little head again. It takes some diligence, and because we've bought into this notion of survival of the fittest, and he or she who has the gold gets who has the gold makes the rules. Well, it doesn't serve. It just doesn't serve us. So, well, what can we do about the world? We can do something about our world, where we exist, our little I'm this little cog in my little wheel. I can do things that help me shine light on situations that are less than satisfactory to me, or that I'm upset about, or I can learn how to communicate with someone else if someone else is involved, not just badmouth them in my head from then on, and then ignore them. I can talk to them. I can tell them what's on my heart, share what's going on, get their perspective, their point of view, and together we have a chance to sort it out. So it comes down to communication and a willingness to say, okay, no more of this. We are not going to hang out in suffering any longer. We are going to enjoy our time on planet Earth. We are going to create heaven on earth. Well, how does that start? That starts with you recognizing your own magnificence, trying that on, and approaching life from the perspective that you have all the power you need to be able to go where you want to go, and you have all the responsibility to make sure that where you go is not going to infringe on anybody else's power to do what they have. So it's not just about rights, it's about rights and responsibilities. We're magnificent enough to do this, and isn't it time? Aren't you tired of listening to all that's going on in the world and say, oh man, are we ever going to figure this out? Well, we need to be determined, and the starting place is in our very own lives, right on our own back doorstep, in our own hearts and minds, to diligently believe that we are worthy of the love that's out there for us, we can shine light on any situation and find some kind of a resolution that makes sense for us, and to be determined to do that. And then I think little by little, as we role model that for our children catch on to that, and then they find even easier ways to not fall into that pit and to move forward in their own magnificence. And then their kids the same. I mean, I want this for my children and my grandchildren. Well, I know that it does start with me. So I'm getting on with it, and I'm really going to challenge you today to do the same thing. Take a look at the conflicts that are going on in your own life right now, whether they're internal conflicts or conflicts with people at work, or people in your social circle, people in your families, and begin to say, how can we come to a peace with this? Because each person who finds peace is going to add to that peaceful light that then we can shine on others. That's it for today. If you're enjoying the Heaven on Earth series, I really encourage you to not only subscribe to this channel, but you can access all of the Heaven on Earth and the Tea with Sue series on my free app, The Magnificence Mentor. If you want to check out the Magnificence Lab, magnificencelab.org, where we're building a community of people who want to tap into their own magnificence and create heaven on earth, then check us out there. Take good care.